Delighted to say that Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, joins us. Good morning to you, Andy. First of all, we know that you've been urging the government to be more cautious. On a practical level, does that mean you telling the people of Manchester or advising the people of Manchester to do things differently?
Yes, I will be strongly encouraging people to continue to wear masks on public transport, Darren. And I think what we saw yesterday from the government was a shift in tone and a sensible one, because the Freedom Day language, honestly, I just don't think works. And the reason why I say that is because there are just under 4 million people in this country who are clinically extremely vulnerable. And if you put yourselves in their shoes, people who have to use public transport because they don't have a car and perhaps are going for a chemo appointment or dialysis using public transport, are they going to feel able to do that when the government's just saying it's expected and recommended that people wear masks? I don't think they are. So one person's Freedom Day ends up being another person's Fear Day. And those 4 million people, in effect, as I read the guidance that the government has issued, they're almost being asked to shield again. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair. I'm not saying, put everything on hold. Definitely not. I broadly agree with the direction the government is taking. But they are an outlier on this issue on public transport and face coverings. Wales and Scotland, I believe, are going to carry on mandating them, and they're right to do that. This government should make it just clear for everybody so everybody knows where they stand. It's a minor inconvenience, but we are going to continue to require a mask on buses, trams and trains. And that will enable those people who are vulnerable to have more confidence to use public transport.
Well, can you essentially direct the public transport services in Manchester to do that, to essentially try and make it, even if it's not legally mandatory, that it is mandatory in order to get on those services?
Well, see, I don't control all of the transport system. Transport outside of London is different. London, Transport for London controls pretty much all of it, whereas outside of London, we don't control the buses or the trains. And the difficulty we have is many more journeys are taken on buses and trains than on our trams. We could enforce on the trams, but the advice I'm getting is that it would be unworkable, because obviously people will be getting off the trams and getting on a bus, and then there's a different rule there. I wouldn't rule it out, so I'm not going to rule it out, but it's a suboptimal approach. The much simpler way is for the government to make it clear that masks are required on all public transport, and that's what I believe they should do. And if they don't do it, I fully expect this time next week to be getting complaints from people who are cancer patients or kidney patients saying, I don't feel now that I can go out and go to essential appointments or get my shopping because I just do not feel safe enough. And you've got to ask yourselves, is that fair to those people? I don't think it is.
In saying that, I think Labour's messaging, the government's been accused of being all over the place on this. Labour seem to be as well, because it's quite difficult to work out whether the party essentially is in favour of relaxing these restrictions on the 19th and the consequences that means for different parts of the country, because, of course, people, in Manchester have unfortunately died at higher rates. And so is Labour's position that apart from masks, you are essentially on the same page as the government?
I've said that. I don't oppose the broader unlocking. The vaccination programme has played a big part in reducing hospitalisation. So we're not in the same position in 2021 as we were in 2020. The context is different, but it doesn't mean that there are not risks. And I think Labour's position is actually quite clear. And I think I've maybe played a role in shaping it. We're not out of the pandemic. Therefore, removing all restrictions, which is what the government is doing, is a mistake. And I've given you that specific example about public transport, but you could look at essential retail as well, because some people have no choice but to go into supermarkets. And I think it's these places that people have to go. There needs to be clearer rules in place over those places to protect people who are more at risk of COVID. And to badge it all as a matter of personal responsibility, well, honestly, I don't think that is the right way to frame it, because one person's choice can affect another person's physical or mental health. If one person is on a tram or a bus refusing to wear a face covering, that decision could cause a very real risk to somebody right next to them who, I say, might have cancer or some other underlying condition, who is anxious about the situation and therefore more at risk. And I just think we're not in a position where it's all just a matter of individual choice. We are still in a pandemic, and we have to proceed cautiously. I think the government was recognising that in their language yesterday, that they just didn't feel able to sort of make a full sort of change on the position, but they should do.
Andy, good morning. It's Kirsty here.
Hi, Kirsty.
Just finally, I know that you are a big sports fan. I've been at events with you and enjoyed those events. I have to get your reaction to, obviously, the abuse of these such players, a couple of Manchester United players there as well, especially Marcus Rashford, who's done so much good. But to see those images on the front of all the papers this morning, the defacing, vandalising of murals of, for example, Rashford, must have disgusted you.
Oh, absolutely, Kirsty. I mean, we were all depressed, weren't we, when we woke up yesterday morning? But that made it so much worse to see that. And to be honest, it explains why these players have been taking the knee. For those who questioned them, that's the answer. I think they've done so much as a group to stick together, to be an England team that everyone can relate to. And I think it's just really disappointing at the end of a fantastic tournament, actually, that we're talking about the 1% of people who just don't represent the vast majority. That mural, Kirsty, is now full of amazing messages. Hero, role model, because that's how we see him here in Greater Manchester. We love him, and that outpouring on the mural was absolutely genuine. There's just no getting away from that. And that should be what defines this summer. The spirit that Gareth Southgate has created around this England team. They're an England team for everybody. And let's talk about the 99% of people who are buying into that rather than the 1% of racists who are trying to ruin it.
And Andy,
exactly.
how do you feel about the Home Secretary's comments? Obviously, Tyrone Mings has stepped in and said that essentially accusing her of stoking the fire around this term of gesture politics when it comes to taking the knee. Do you think the Home Secretary's been a hypocrite on this, frankly?
Well, I think certainly taking a different tone more recently than at the start of the tournament, no doubt about it. I think Tyrone Mings is right to call out politicians when they do that. I would expect to be called out if you're saying one thing one time and then doing another. And I think, as Angela Rayner said yesterday, if you blow dog whistles, the dogs start barking. You encourage people to feel that they can target these players. So I just think over the last decade, we've had leaders around the world, particularly in the US, but here to a degree too, that have kind of just allowed stuff to happen, and they really shouldn't. What leaders do and say really matters. It matters on the streets because it creates a climate there that can affect other people's safety. And I just think, this government has been stoking culture wars, and I just think they've got to kind of recognise that it just leaves you with a very divided, fearful society, and it doesn't actually get you anywhere. And I hope this Home Secretary and other senior ministers kind of learn lessons from this summer. The fact that one Tory MP was sitting in his house not watching the final because he got himself into such a ridiculous position over all of this. I mean, what person says it's okay to boo an England team seconds before they kick off in a major tournament? Just from a pure football test, that's a completely ridiculous statement to make. But they all got themselves into a really bad position playing these culture wars, and I hope it's a lesson to all of them.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.